Economic growth is one of the main goals of macroeconomic policy because it affects living standards, employment and government finances. Economic growth is an increase in the real output of an economy. It's usually measured by the percentage change in real GDP, meaning gross domestic product adjusted for inflation. If real GDP is rising, the economy will be producing more goods and services than before. And this graph shows economic growth in the UK, which is mostly positive apart from a few recessions where there was a temporary fall in real GDP. Economists often want to focus on real GDP per capita, which adjusts for population growth and gives a better indication of changes in living standards. This shows UK real GDP per capita, which grew at a slower rate than real GDP because there was a lot of population growth in that period. What about the causes of economic growth? Well, growth is caused by both demand-side and supply-side factors. This diagram shows a rise in AD and AS, leading to higher real GDP. Demand-side factors that cause growth would involve lower income tax rates, higher wages. If income tax is cut, households have more disposable income to spend on goods and services. Also, just a rise in real wages will give people more spending power. Consumption will go up. Other factors could include lower interest rates, higher government spending, or just rising confidence. And if there's a rise in AD, firms will try to respond by producing more, leading to higher output and employment. But if growth is just short run, if it's just caused by a rise in demand and demand grows faster than the economy's productive capacity, it can lead to demand pull inflation and the growth is not sustainable in the long term. Long-term economic growth occurs when the economy's productive capacity increases. This is shown by a rightward shift in the long-run aggregate supply. You could also show it by a rightward shift in the production possibility frontier. Long-term economic growth depends on factors such as an increase in labour supply, more investment, more infrastructure improvements, better education and training, which will help increase labour productivity. Now, economic growth can bring several benefits. Higher output usually leads to higher incomes, improving living standards. Growth usually helps to reduce unemployment, as firms will need to employ more workers as they produce more. In addition, economic growth will lead to higher tax revenues. If people earn more, they pay more income tax, and this allows the government to spend more on infrastructure, creating a kind of virtuous circle. What about the evaluation of economic growth? Well, economic growth is not always sustainable. If it's driven mainly by rising AD, it can lead to inflation and balance of payments problems. Higher growth will lead to more spending on imports and a current account deficit. But long-term economic growth based on productivity and rising technology is much more stable, and there you can have growth without inflation, and that's more desirable. However, the benefits of growth may be unevenly distributed. Higher GDP does not necessarily lead to lower inequality or reductions in relative poverty, because gains may accrue mainly to higher income groups or the wealthy. This shows US real GDP. It's increased a lot since 1980, but by comparison, median real wages have not increased at the same rate. Also, it depends on the nature of economic growth. For example, if you have growth in finance based in one city like London, people in left-behind regions may not benefit from growth. Economic growth can also impose environmental costs. When you increase output, you tend to get more pollution and resource depletion, reducing long-term welfare, and these external costs are usually not measured by GDP. But at the same time, these days with modern technology like solar panels and battery technology, you can have growth without increasing CO2 emissions. Also, final point is that economic growth doesn't necessarily mean people feel better off and may have higher well-being, because economic growth may fail to measure factors such as health, leisure, life expectancy, quality of life. And so when you're comparing economic development, it's also important to look beyond just GDP and economic growth.